Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Articulate Fly. On this episode, I'm joined by Jake Darling, manager of Unicoi Outfitters. Jake shares his fly fishing journey, and we take a deep dive into North Georgia fishing and shoal bass. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. But before we get to the interview, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you like the podcast, please tell a friend, and please subscribe and leave us a rating and review in the podcatcher of your choice. It really helps us out. And I'm excited to bring the business and consulting skills I've developed off the water to the Articulate Fly community. If you're in the industry and feel like you're leaving money on the table or the day-to-day grind of running your business is killing you, let me help you find a more profitable and enjoyable path in the sport. Head over to www.thearticulatefly.com/consulting and let's start our conversation today. Now, on to our interview. Well, Jake, welcome to the Articulate Fly.
Thank you, Marvin. Excited to be here.
Yeah, you bet. I'm excited to have you. And we have a tradition on the Articulate Fly. We like to ask all of our guests to share their earliest fishing memory.
So my earliest fishing memory, I don't remember exactly how old I was, but what I do remember is that my dad and I were at there was a local pay-to-play trout pond. And I had a little bitty Snoopy rod. The rod couldn't have been any more than 2 feet long. And when you came up to this trout pond, they had they fished with, the cheese that you get in like the cracker sticks at the gas station that's in between liquefied and solid.
I do.
That is what they used as bait. And you would ball it up and you'd put it on a hook and throw it out into this trout pond. And I was hooking these huge rainbows that were well over 20 inches. And they were literally just screaming the guts out of this little Snoopy rod that I had. And I remember my dad having to hold me by my belt loop to keep from getting drug into the pond. And I thought it was the best thing ever because we filled up our bucket. And I remember my dad saying, "We got to get out of here because you're going to break me." And so that would be my first fishing memory ever.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a trout pond experience. It wasn't my first fishing trip, but I remember the whole discussion about, do you pay by time or do you pay by the pound?
Yeah. They, you got to take all of them home with you, and it gets pretty expensive pretty quick.
So Jake, when did you come to the dark side of fly fishing?
So my first fly fishing experience, my dad was a really big angler in general. He, was a member of the Bass Club way back in the day. He conventional tackle fished, he fly fished. Everything about him was fishing. And when I was in elementary school, we had a little John boat, and my dad would come pick me up from school. We'd go to a local lake, and we would brim and bass fish. And the first memory I have of fly fishing was when I buried a Betts popper in his back right between his shoulder blades. But I don't remember many details about that day other than him getting very frustrated because he had this big number 4 popper stuck right in the middle of his back that he couldn't reach and I couldn't get out. So I'll tell you my first trout fishing, fly fishing experience. My dad was on a fishing trip in Michigan, and I was pretty young into the fly game. I'd only been a couple of times, and my mom, I was pestering her to take me fishing. And so my mom took me to the Tallulah River in northeast Georgia. It wasn't far from the house. And I had an old fiberglass rod, and I had a Martin reel. And this was back in the day. You remember the little plastic pieces that you used to use on the end of your fly line to connect your leader, where you had you would slide your fly line through it and tie an overhand knot, and then you'd slide your leader through it and tie an overhand knot?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, so I had that on my rig. I thought we were big timing with the equipment that we had. And so I made a cast underneath this tree with a white brim popper because I didn't know any better. And the stock trout came up and ate it. And I set the hook on it. And I literally like froze. I didn't know what to do. And so I chunked the rod onto the sandbar that I was standing on. And I ran out to the tip of the rod and I grabbed the line and I literally started hand lining the trout into me. And I landed him. And I was so proud of him that I put him on a stringer and I literally walked him up and down the dirt road there at the Tallulah River like a dog to the point that I wore the skin completely off of the fish. That would be my first fly fishing experience that I really remember.
Yeah, that's very neat. And, as we like to say, there's been a lot of water under the bridge since then. Who are some of the folks that have mentored you on your fly fishing journey, and what have they taught you?
How much time do we have?
All the time you need.
There's so many people. A lot of people don't know this side of kind of my story and where I come from, but growing up, my dad knew all the guys at the store. Every weekend we went to the shop. Every weekend we were fishing. My dad was friends with the guys that worked at the shop. He never worked in the industry, but we were constantly fishing. And so I grew up fishing around and with the guys who were making a living doing it. Way back, this would have been mid to late 90s. And so I grew up fishing with them. And when I was young, my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And he ended up passing away when I was 14. So in that time, there was a lot of guys that from the shop that were friends with my dad that literally stepped in almost as a father figure to me. A couple of guys, like I'm sure I'm going to miss a few or leave a few out, but some of them that jump out to me the most, would be a guy named Doug Westmoreland, which happened to be a really good friend of my dad's. My dad worked at during the last part of his life, he worked at a parts store in Commerce, and Doug had a automotive shop there. And so Doug and my dad would fish together, and we would all go on camping trips. And Doug, he was a man of, he had a lot of integrity, and he knew a lot about fishing. But the biggest attribute to Doug was he was always the one that was willing to lend a helping hand. And when my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer, my dad told Doug, he said, I would like to go fishing with Jake one last time. And so Doug and my mom arranged for me and my dad to go fish on the same river where I caught my first trout ever on fly. And that was the last time that I fished with my father, before he passed. And I still talk to Doug to this day, off and on. And we don't get to fish much together anymore, but he's still an important part of my life. When my dad passed away, I remember they had the funeral service here at Clarksville Baptist Church right down the street. And we were sitting there having the service, and I look across the back room. There's probably 15 or 20 guys standing back there that are all in blue jeans and fishing shirts. And it was all the guys from the shop. All the guys from Unicoi had come to my dad's funeral. And I remember Jimmy walking up to my mom after it was over, and he said, don't worry, we're going to take care of him. And that's exactly what they did. To name a few guys that were, important to me and when I was young in that time of need number one, first and foremost, would be Jimmy. He's always been like a father figure to me. He's always been influential in my career. And you won't find a guy that is any better than him. I mean, he is as good as they come, no question. There was also a couple of guys in there, Julian Burr and John Browning. Those guys were guiding back then. And they took me fishing. They, taught me about fishing. But I think more importantly, more than anything, we were fishing because that's what brought us together. But there was a lot more to it. They were teaching me more about life and what it meant to be a man. And these guys invited me into their hunting club. They invited me, to hang out with their families. And so, that meant a whole lot to me. And having somebody that was willing to put their arm around me and say, come on over and help me out along the way. Some others that come to mind would, Jeff Derniak. When right after my dad had passed, Jimmy and Jeff would take me and another young gentleman fishing. When I was young, Henry Cowan, I didn't know Henry didn't know me. But the first time I met Henry, he has a very strong draw toward, people want to be around him. He's a lot of fun. He's a good guy. And I just remember him taking me fishing when I was younger. And we just kind of hit it off from there. He was calling the store. We were chatting. I talked to Henry, probably 2 or 3 times a week now, still in my life. And, he's always kind of giving me advice or helping me connect with people. He's always willing to go out of his way to help me better my career. There's a couple other guys at the shop. Dale Waters, that fished with my dad. John Cross, he was the manager at Unicoi. He's the one who gave me my start at a young age. A few other guys in there that were guiding that just kind of took time out of their life to take me, take me fishing and just kind of shape me and mold me into what I became.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. And I mean, I always say the fly fishing community is probably one of the most generous communities of people I think I know on the planet.
There's no question. Everybody that you meet are down to earth, humble people that are more than willing to help somebody out.
Yeah. I'll give you a funny Henry story. Henry called me on my birthday and saying happy birthday to me.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he did.
He just did the same thing to me a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it's all good stuff. And so, you're starting your fly fishing journey. I think I was telling you before we started recording, I think the last time I saw you was probably, I don't know, probably 10 plus years ago in the shop. And I think probably around that time you were doing the team stonefly thing. And I was kind of curious about, kind of what the competitive fishing experience was like and, how it impacted your future fishing.
Yeah. I enjoyed the competitive fishing. I played soccer growing up and I actually had a scholarship to play in college. And so I always had that competitive side. I was a lot younger, and so I probably was more competitive than I am now. But I got a call from Gordon Vanderpool one evening, and he invited me to come and try out for the team, so to speak. And they were just forming the team up, and so I came and fished with them and ended up joining the team. And when I first got into it was, I don't know if you remember or not, but they used to have a casting competition to get into the fishing aspect. Do you remember that?
That I don't remember.
Okay. Yeah. So they had basically way back when you would show up and cast and say there was 30 anglers and they would take the top 20 and they had accuracy and distance. And in the first tournament I showed up at, I didn't make the casting cut. I didn't get to fish. It was on the broad river there that feeds into Lake Lure, and it was a really humbling moment because here I was surrounded by all these great anglers, and I thought that I was really good, and I didn't even get to fish because I didn't make the cut. But I liked that format. I went home and started practicing casting, and I liked that format because what the way it was formatted was however you placed in the casting competition was who got to pick what bead of water they wanted to fish. And so I think that to be a good angler, there is definitely some element of casting involved in it. But anyhow, later on they kind of switched how it was formatted, and the biggest thing that it taught me was how to best use your time on the water, because you're on limited time and you're trying to score the highest points that you can. And it also taught me how to fish water that is in front of you effectively, even though it may not be the best water on the stream. This is the hand you're dealt right now. And so how do you approach this water and how do you fish this water to get the most out of it?
Yeah, it's interesting because I know some people don't like comp fishing, but I always kind of equate it to like they're sort of like the Formula One team for the automobile manufacturers, and that I always think of those guys as kind of being on the front line of solving fishing problems.
Yeah. I mean, there was some really solid sticks that were fishing back then. I mean, guys that were really talented.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. So let's see, who would have some of those folks been? Like Michael Yelton was probably one of them, right?
Michael Yelton, Josh, oh gosh, what is Josh's last name? It's not Josh Grafflin. Um, Gosh, it'll probably come to me a little bit. Gordon Vanderpool, the guy, I fished a fair amount of team tournaments, and I fished with a guy named Chris Smith. Um, that would be, I mean, that's been a long time ago. That's probably the first names that come to mind to me, just the guys that I was closest to.
Yeah, it's funny. I've gotten a chance to fish with Gordon over the years, and I mean, it's a pretty amazing thing to be on the water with him.
Yeah, he's a very talented fisherman.
Yeah.
And he can always wade to where you can because he's like 6'7".
Yeah, and he's a big dude, so he can like go fish the other side of the ripping current too, right?
Yes.
So, at what point of your fly fishing journey did you get the guide bug?
So when I decided it was what I wanted to do, I got a scholarship to play college at Emmanuel College. And my freshman year, the high school team I come from was a pretty good team. And my freshman year, I showed up and it had become more like a job. And we kind of split this season. I think we were like 10-10. And I'm sitting there and there wasn't really anything that I wanted to study. And so I walked into my coach's office and I said, "Hey," I said, "you don't have to worry about working me up a scholarship for next year. I'm not going to be here." And he said, "Okay, so what are you going to do?" And I said, I'm going to go back home and I'm going to get in the fishing industry and I'm going to go to school at night and I'm going to study business." And he literally laughed at me. And when I came home, it was full bore guiding from that point on.
Yeah. And so did you kind of break into that part of the game like through Unicoi, or did you kind of start doing something else and then migrate to the shop later?
No, everything I've ever done has all been through Unicoi. I mean, I guess it was kind of, it was destined to happen. I mean, I had grown up around those guys. I fished with them. as a young teenager all the way up. And so, I mean, when it come time that I decided that that's what I wanted to do, then that's who I went to.
Yeah. Yeah, got it. And so, I know you mentioned a bunch of folks. You mentioned those guys earlier in terms of fly fishing mentors, kind of any new guide mentors that you want to give a shout out to?
Like in today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm gravitated towards those, what I call the OGs, the guys that kind of paved the way for everybody else to have an opportunity, the guys that were doing it before it was cool. Um, so I kind of put myself in that group of guys with the older guys. So I think they have a lot of wisdom. Um, they're all very honest, hardworking guys that have always done everything ethically, and I respect that.
Yeah, I think the other thing too, right, is kind of the older guys didn't have the internet. So, I mean, they really had to figure stuff out and you couldn't buy everything you needed to be successful.
No, no. I mean, I remember when we started fishing, um, we had glacier glove waders that the feet were made of um, nylon and they were pointy like Tinkerbell shoes. They didn't have Sims Gore-Tex waders back then.
Yeah, it's interesting. I interviewed Kevin Howell, and he was telling me that his dad and uncle used to buy Vietnam era surplus combat boots, and
Mhm.
they would grind the soles off of them and glue felt to them, and that's how they made the first wading boots.
Yeah, it was a lot different back then.
Yeah, and he said, the waders were so bad that you started wet wading in March, and
Mhm.
just different, kind of a different game, but everybody figured it out, right?
Yeah, yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. So, Jake, what do you think's the secret to being a good guide?
Yeah, so I kind of got four main things that I think are the secret to being a good guide. Um, I think if you look at all these successful guides in the industry, they all have the same characteristics to them. First one for me is just being able to have the ability to formulate a day that's going to cater to your client's needs or wants. And a lot of times that's on somewhat short notice. Um, somebody walks in for a trip and you meet them and they may be like, hey, I want to really work on my streamer fishing today, or I would like to learn how to dry dropper fish, or if you have some time, can you teach me how to double haul? Or, just whatever they want. Being flexible and being able to tailor a day to them and what is going to be a success to them, I think is the most important thing. Secondly, I think that, being able to offer a memorable experience. They're there for an experience. Yes, the fishing is something they're interested in, but overall, they want to have a good experience. And I think that's, through entertainment and through conversations with your customers and kind of getting to know them, more so than just fishing together and watching your watch and waiting on 4 hours or 8 hours to be over so that you can be on to the next one. Some of my best friends that I almost treat, that they're like family to me are some of my clients. And we met through fishing, but now um, we talk to each other a whole lot more than we fish, and we care about what's going on in each other's lives. So just building that relationship with them. Another thing that comes to mind would be patience. I think as a guide, you have to be very patient and understand that we all started in the same place. Even though you're a guide now and you're very knowledgeable about what you do, there was a time that you didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about fishing. I didn't know which end of the rod to hold, where to start. I was overwhelmed. And somebody, you know, went to help me to help me kind of gain a knowledge of what was going on. And then the last thing I would say is you got to be really good at what you do. You got to be good at teaching. You got to be good at catching fish, but you got to be able to make that not be the focal point of the day.
Yeah, got it. And Jake, what do you think is the biggest misconception people have about the life of a fishing guide?
The thing we hear often is you got it made. You get to go fishing every day. And it's not like that. Um, yes, we get to spend a lot of time on the water. Um, we get to fish through other people. We get to enjoy those experiences with them. But there's a lot of prep work that goes into the trip. You know, the only side that the customer may see is the 8 hours that you spend in the boat while y'all are together. But an 8 hour day is really more like a 12-hour day because you got to get up, you've got to, you have to prep the equipment, you have to prep the lunches, you have to wash the boat, you have to travel to the river, you got to put it in the water, you got to run the shuttle. And then when you get home, you got to clean it all up and you got to get going for the next day. So there's a lot of work that goes into it. And even preparation, when you're not working, when you're not on the water, you're always out, you're always keeping track with what's going on with the fish. Um, you're always exploring new places, something that may be a new offering that you can offer to your clients. So, there's always something going on in building your brand.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, and then you got the multi-day guys, you're going to probably end up having dinner with them at least once, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And so, I understand that now you primarily guide for bass. And I was kind of curious what drew you to bass over trout.
Yeah, so my guiding career, I did my first guide trip by accident. Then when I came back from college, I got into it and I was wade fishing for trout. And then I migrated to where I was float fishing on the Toccoa River and the Tuckasegee River for trout. And then I met my girlfriend at the time, which is now my wife. She was from over in that area, so I was still spending a lot of time guiding over on the Toccoa. And then when we were going to get married and she moved here, I kind of was looking for something more localized. I was driving like 140 miles round trip each day to go fish. And so I was literally getting up and leaving the house at like 5:30 and getting home at 7:30. And it was just a lot going on. And I wanted to do something that was different, to kind of differentiate myself from other guides, and landed on the shoal bass thing. And I grew up in the area. I fished the river a little bit when I was younger, but not a ton. Then started fishing it more and more. And then when I made the transition back here to guiding locally, that's kind of when I gravitated more towards the shoal bass.
Got it. And so, what makes them such an attractive species to chase on the fly?
The shoal bass tell a cool story. You're talking about a fish that is a very limited range fish. It's not like you can go anywhere in the world and do it. They live in a really pretty environment. There's nothing better than like late spring dropping in and having the rhododendron and mountain laurel blooming all on the banks and the habitat that they live in. The arena just feels right. It's what I like. And the way they eat a fly, they're an ambush fish. They're going to get onto something and they're going to wait for something to come by and they're going to run out and grab it. So most of the time the eats are visual. I like that. And I like they're very migratory fish. They're constantly moving for seasonal changes. And I like that factor to where when I slide the boat in the water every day, I've got to go hunt them. It's not going to be like it was yesterday. It's not going to be like it was this time last year. So I like that factor of having to put the pieces of the puzzle together every day.
Yeah, pretty neat. How do they compare to smallmouth?
I would say a shoal bass is everything that a smallmouth is. They just don't jump. Um, they pound for pound, they pull just as hard as smallmouth. They're just not an aerial fish. They're going to pull their sleeves up and they're going to come to the boat and they're going to fight you at the boat. But they dig really hard. They're visual feeders, so it's, typically a clear water deal, and you get to see it all happen.
Yeah, I always think it's a fun to, like in my part of the world, to fish for smallmouth with like a white game changer, and like 1 minute you see it, and then the next minute it's gone.
That's the best bite, when you see your fly coming and it goes like 4 feet to the left or the right, or it just completely blacks out.
Yeah,
I mean, it never gets old.
yeah,
I do it every day.
yeah. And so, Jake, what's the typical kind of shoal bass season look like?
Yeah, so we start fishing. They're warm-blooded fish. They like warm weather. We start fishing late spring, when the fish are pre-spawn. And usually that time of year, we got pretty good flows. A lot of streamer fishing, intermediate lines, sink tips, 8-weight, 7-8 weight. A lot of game changers, any kind of swim fly stuff. Then post spawn, I usually won't fish a whole lot during the spawn. I kind of leave them alone just because it's such a fragile resource. I kind of let them do their thing. And then in the summer, we start fishing topwater bugs, and that's usually 6-weight on floating line. It can be a lot of different types of surface bugs. And then we slide into fall and things start cooling down. Fish start feeding them back up for the winter and start, kind of transition back towards streamer fishing again.
Yeah. So it does sound a lot like a kind of a smallmouth bite, I would imagine, right? You probably get to fish for them a little earlier than some folks do, and probably, get to fish pretty late because you're a pretty mild climate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, Jake, in terms of tackle, what would be kind of a typical kind of rod reel fly line combo if people wanted to chase shoal bass?
Yeah, so really I say you have to have 2 combos if you want to fish the whole season. Usually fish a 6 with a floating line a lot. Use that with some kind of topwater bug. And then we'll fish 7 and 8s with intermediates or sink tips on them, and that's what we're streamer fishing with.
Yeah. And on the bug presentation, do they like animation, or is it kind of like what we do up here in the summertime where we plop that cicada down and just let it drift until somebody eats it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it depends on what time of year you're topwater bugging. Early season, there's more water. They like it to move a lot more, and you get a lot splashier bite. I think that's more of a reactionary deal. And then later, as the water gets low, it becomes more of a subtle twitching bite. And that's by far my favorite because it's more like hunting at that point. You're looking for a certain fish.
Yeah, it's pretty cool too when you get to see them and you watch them when they're kind of like backpedaling, 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 and then they eat.
Yes. That's the best part. I jokingly say that you got to have ice running in your veins because they will come out and they will headstand on the fly. And I've seen them headstand up to 20 seconds before they ever take it. A few years back, I remember I found this fish that was pretty large, and these big fish, the 18, 20-inch fish, they're really old. They grow pretty slow, so they're fairly old. So they've been in the system for a while, and they get pretty knowledgeable as to what's going on. And I found this fish, and I wanted to go back and catch it. And we set the boat upriver of it, and made a 45-degree shot down to it so that it had no idea that we were there. And the fish comes up, and it headstands on the fly, and it literally pushed it with its nose twice, and the third time it ate it.
Yeah. Doesn't get much better than that, does it?
No, that's the most addictive part of it to me.
Yeah. So to back up just a little bit, how old were you when you started working in the shop?
My first job at Unicoi, my mom would drive me to the shop, and I would pick up the trash on the river and clean the trails. I probably was 15.
Yeah, very cool. And so, how has your career at Unicoi kind of evolved over the years?
Yeah, so Started out with just guiding, and mostly wade fishing for trout, and then did that for a few years, and then I got an opportunity to move into the retail side and come on as the assistant manager. And during that time, I was still guiding and working retail, and got to dabble a little bit into the purchasing side of the business, and did that for a while, and then John, who was the manager for a long time, he retired, and I took over his position as manager.
Super cool. And, I always like to ask this question of fly shop folks because I always believe every shop kind of has its own personality. And I was kind of curious how you would describe Unicoi Outfitters' shop personality and kind of what makes it unique.
Yeah, so kind of our tagline would be that we're friendly local experts. And so many times I've been in stores that, not here in this area, but traveling. And you walk in and people acknowledge that you walk in the door, but, they don't show as much interest. They don't start small talk of, hey, you going fishing? Where have you been fishing? And kind of maybe lend a little bit of advice. So the one thing that we always try to do is to try to be approachable to people, and also go out of our way to help them, and whether that be through knowledge or product or whatever it may be, but just to help them have a better day on the water.
Yeah, absolutely. A little Southern hospitality goes a long way, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, honestly, for the guys working behind the counter, it helps the day pass a lot quicker because you're engaged with the customer, and so it makes everything go by a lot quicker. So I like that part. I like to be able, people ask me all the time, they're like, well, do you like the guiding more or do you like the retail more? And honestly, I like the mix of the two. I did the guiding thing full time, and it's a busy season to where you make all of your money in a few short months, and during those months you're really grinding. And then I've been on the retail side too, and I like the mix. I like for people to come in the store and get to interact with them and engage with them and talk to them about, whether they're going fishing, whether they've have been fishing. And then I like to be able to take people fishing too as well. I jokingly say that that's kind of like a day off when I get to lace up the boots and go fishing.
Yeah. It's kind of neat too, because at least kind of from on the other side, I really enjoy, building those relationships over time, right, with people in shops. And, kind of to your point, like, you now have friends that were started out as guide clients.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing too, in kind of this day of e-commerce, is that kind of makes shops sticky for people,
Yeah, I mean, honestly, for us as brick and mortar, that's all we have is the experience that we offer when customers come through the door. In this market, everybody who sells product signs an agreement to sell it at the same price, and so really all you have that differentiates you is your service.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're close to Atlanta, so that makes it even more challenging because you got so many more people and, more shops and all that kind of stuff too. But Jake, one of the great things kind of about the Southeast and North Georgia in particular is you have such an incredibly diverse fishery, right? So, you've got so many other angling opportunities in addition to trout and shoal bass. And I was wondering if you could kind of share those with our listeners in case they don't know about all of them. And then I'm pretty sure you guys guide for all of them too, right?
We got for most of them, and if we don't, then we know somebody who does. And so that's the good thing about everybody here in the industry is everybody gets along really well and everybody helps each other out. And I just think that's part of being in the South. So even if we don't specialize in something, we know somebody who does. But to get back to your question, we've got stripers, landlocked stripers. There's guys who target them on the lakes. We do some striper trips in the spring up the river, fishing out of a jet boat. That would probably be my second favorite thing to do. We have really good spotted bass fisheries around the area, so we have Highland herring fisheries. We have really good spotted bass fishing in both lakes and rivers. We've got a pretty decent carp fishery for, sight fishing for carp. We have some pretty cool black bass around the area. So we have substrains of red eye bass. So right here in our general area, we have Bartram's bass and Chattahoochee bass, which would be a substrain of a red eye. And then we also have, I guess you could classify it as all the trash fish, the gar and the pickerel and all those toothy critters too as well.
Yeah, got to get those big nylon braided flies for those guys, right?
Yeah. The guys at the store have kind of figured out a way to hook them on a hook. So it's a pretty neat deal on how they're doing it. But I know for the longest time, the rope it works well, but it's really hard it's hard to get it out of their mouth. So the way they're doing it with the hook is pretty unique.
Yeah, and they've got pretty hard mouths too, don't they?
Oh, it's solid bone.
Yeah.
Solid bone.
Yeah. And so, and if none of that stuff floats your boat, I know you guys have kind of recently added destination travel to your program. You want to let us know a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we've done some destination travel. We've been to Brazil and a few other places in South America. And Jimmy's going, he's got a Dorado trip next April. That'd kind of be our biggest thing coming up for destination, which is something that I've always wanted to do. I haven't been able to do it yet, but hope to one day.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. I know that's with the set guys, and I had Gustavo on, and I think I was telling you before we started recording that I probably fished with him. I hate to even say it, almost 20 years ago, but kind of brought him on to talk about Dorado stuff. And I mean, they've got it pretty dialed in down there. So I would imagine it's going to be a pretty awesome opportunity.
Oh, I'm sure it's going to be an incredible trip.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like they kind of rotate you through, and so you get to fish the big river with it, and you get the air conditioning, and then you're gonna get to go kind of back in the woods and kind of do for the almost like where you get to go to the nurseries and catch those baby tarpon. And I know those guys, their hospitality is awesome, so I would imagine it's a horrible way to spend 7 to 10 days.
No, I think it's a lot of flavors of ice cream, and it's just a matter of which one you want. So I think it's great. It's always incredible to travel to these other places and just see how they operate and how great their hospitality is and how they do things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, we're kind of marching into the middle of October, so it's kind of that kickoff for Southern trout season. But do you have any kind of upcoming events in the shop or kind of in the area you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, so next big thing for us would be the Atlanta Fly Fishing Show is coming up 1st of February. That's the next big event for us. We just had a fall kickoff a couple weeks ago. And then we'll be having a spring kickoff too as well, where we kind of have a gathering at the shop and have some demo days and have some on the water instruction and whatnot, and just gets people kind of fired up for fishing season as we transition into that.
Yeah, I tell you, that Atlanta Fly Fishing Show is really, really taken off. I mean, I would say it's probably after Edison and Denver, probably the largest show that Ben and Chuck put on.
Yeah, last year, everybody was kind of scared after COVID what was going to happen as far as how people were going to turn out, and it had great attendance last year, and so I imagine that this year it'll be pretty close.
Yeah, pretty funny having to fight all those little kids at the Lego thing that was next door.
I didn't get to experience that, but I did hear about it.
Yeah, just made it hard to get lunch, that's all.
Yeah.
And but it was good. And then, watching little kids have meltdowns and you're like, dude, I'm going back in the fly fishing show.
Yeah, I get to watch that every day. So
yeah,
I know how it is.
It's all good stuff. Well, Jake, before I let you go this evening, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah. So just to kind of point a few things out, some people may not be aware, but we actually recently picked up 2 pieces of private water back in the spring, and they've both been fishing really well. So we've got a little bit different experiences to offer to our clientele. And, I think early on, people are always looking for knowledge and what may be going on in the area. And one of our staff members, Jeff Derniak, puts out a weekly fishing report on our social media and on our blog every week that's full of intel from that week. So it's a really fresh report. Wes puts in a hot fly list there for the week. All of our guides are reporting in, and it's got fishing intel from all across the state. So really good place to, if you're thinking about going fishing that weekend, or you just want to know what's going on in the area, to gain some knowledge and have a better grasp on what's happening once you get out on the water.
Yeah. I tell you too, because I do fishing reports with various guides and shops. I think if you go back and you listen for an entire year, you'll learn a ton about the fishery too.
Oh, no question. No question. And that was one thing that we wanted to do when we built the blog, is we have archives over on one side of the webpage, which gives you the ability to go back and look year after year of kind of what's happening.
Yeah, I've learned a ton just recording them, and you want to let folks know. So you've got the shop in Helen, and then you've got the country store. You want to let folks know where they're located, hours, and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, so the shop in Helen is right just south of town on Main Street. It's 7280 South Main Street is the address. That store is open 7 days a week from 8 to 5. And then the Unicoi Outfitters General Store in Clarksville is right in downtown in the square. The address there is 1420 Washington Street. And that store is open Monday through Saturday, 8 to 5.
Got it. And if folks wanted to find a website and social media and, follow the shop and all the fishing adventures, where should they go?
Yes, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook to be our 2 biggest social platforms that we put out intel on. And then also on our website, which also has a link to our blog too as well.
Awesome. And I'll drop all that stuff in the show notes for everybody.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, Jake, I appreciate you not going home to 2 little kids and sitting in the shop and recording with me this evening. Look forward to crossing paths with you soon.
You bet. I had a great time. Thank you.
You bet. Take care. Folks, I hope you enjoyed that as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. Tight lines, everybody.